Good to see everybody as usual. And it's a glorious summer day. So I'm really delighted that all of you made the choice to start your day with some Dharma. And summer is very fleeting in Maine, so I especially appreciate your commitment to the Dharma. So today we're making a transition. We had been looking at lineage probably for the past 6 to 8 weeks. And before that, we spent several months going deeply into the loving kindness practice. And before that, we were looking at a meditation text that I think we spent 9 or 10 months on. So we go back and forth between long investigations and interludes. And now we're making a transition into a long investigation again. And I really thought a lot about what the next text would be and how it fits into everything that we've been looking at together. It's fascinating for me to contemplate both how much there is to learn about Buddhism and how we learn, and then how each person comes to the Dharma and what they come wanting to learn. So we say in Buddhism there are 84,000 different kinds of teachings because there are 84,000 different minds. So each of us has an inclination and receptivity to different approaches and different doorways to the Dharma. And I think if we were to really think about it, we come to the Dharma because there are unanswered questions in our lives, questions that our families haven't answered, the culture hasn't answered, our education hasn't answered. And for each one of us, that sparks a spiritual search. And in some ways, it's connected to our unease or pain that we experience in life. And in some ways, it's really an inner knowing that there is a joy in life that hasn't been addressed, or we have an intuition that there's something that is present but unawakened. And then within that search, there are lots of different phases. It can be a peripheral aspect of your life, something you encounter, let's say in a yoga class, a class that you take and then maybe don't take anymore. Last 10 minutes, it's rest on the floor and they call it meditation. It can be in a group that you go to. Lots of things are called meditation. So there's a peripheral kind of encounter that makes you want to learn more. And then when you want to learn more, if you happen upon Buddhist meditation, then we're talking about something more specific. And then if you happen upon, let's say, Zen or Tibetan or Vipassana, each one of these gets even more specific and has a way of learning what that kind of meditation offers. So you can see, okay, within Buddhism, there's a range, and within that range, there are things that you're inclined towards, but then there are great areas of knowledge that you can start to apply. And as you go deeper, you see, well, they all have something in common, but until you learn the area of knowledge, you couldn't actually see what they have in common. So this is how we're learning. And then here at Vajradakini, we have Sundays where we're just taking pieces an hour at a time, which then educationally and experientially is the part that I have great joy about it is how do you be effective in this context? And this morning I was thinking about, well, 30 years ago, 30 plus years ago, probably 40 years ago, what brought me to meditation? What first got me curious about meditation? And it was actually sand mandalas. I went from being sort of peripherally curious to wanting to know more when in Boston I saw the monks actually making a sand mandala. And the sand mandala is this presented in an art museum. It's this beautiful, elaborate work of art that's very complex, that's made with a kind of funnel with a vibration, a striker on top of the funnel that makes a vibration, which allows the sand to come out smoothly and easily, building this whole picture. And then what was significant was then at the end, they swept it all away. So to my initially naive eyes, it looked like they destroyed it. But when I started learning more about it, I learned that actually, as a meditation practice, the monks were making an architectural blueprint of an elaborate temple, and that in meditation practice, you'd be visualizing that temple, and in the temple would be one of the Vajrayana deities, and then you would do the practice of that deity. In the course of that practice, the deities would come to reside in each grain of sand, and then you would collect the sand and put it in the flowing water, and the water through the rain cycle, the water cycle, would then take the blessings of all the meditation done in the ritual for that deity across the world in terms of rain. So when I saw the connection between art and spirituality, which I could see in the museum, there was some sort of a connection, although I didn't know what it was, then I could see, oh, behind this is something truly profound, and it is connected with compassion in that you are bringing this cycle of blessings to all sentient beings through the rain. Then there was, let's say, the right key for me. So my early life, professionally, I was an artist, and I was, of course, interested in kindness and compassion. I shouldn't say of course. It was probably taking the Bodhisattva vow on many previous lives. There was a part of my being was interested in kindness and compassion, but I didn't know where to find the teachings that would open that in a way that I could grow. Through the sand mandala, I was led by the key of that practice, where my way of knowing fit the key that opened that door, which is to say that each of us comes karmically and, let's say, with our natural inclinations to the door with a key. But once the door is open, there is this vast and profound knowledge. And then we have to figure out a way to make a practice path, a study path, that allows us to access the depth of profundity that our nature took us through the doorway to. So then, in terms of Vajradakini, the particular gateway that we set up was during COVID. So Vajradakini sort of switched its vision, or rethought its vision and mission, and switched from a training center for Western monastics to, let's say, a compassion outreach beginning meditation compassion outreach mission in Portland, a more urban center. And then COVID hit, and it was this incredible worldwide crisis. So to meet that crisis, we started with an online learning program. And the first text that we worked with was Shanti Deva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. And that was very intentional because we were in crisis. People's fear was taking over, and our fear of each other led to isolation and a questioning of how to meet this particular crisis with compassion rather than aggression. And Shanti Deva's Way of Life is the absolutely classic text that teaches fearless compassion. And it can be understood at so many different levels. It can be understood as a self-help book, like how do I deal with day-to-day what's going on, to how do I open the prajna or the complete wisdom that Buddhism has to offer. So we focused on that text, I think probably for a year and a half, and then moved to similar classic text that in many ways addressed how we related to our own daily lives and how could Buddhism be effective in becoming more open-hearted. And we could see it as addressing all levels. If you're curious and interested, if you identify as a Buddhist, if you want to learn more deeply about general Buddhism. And now there's a sense from many people, a desire to go more deeply into Buddhism. And in order to do that, we have to address, let's say, a bigger range of Buddhist philosophy, and at the same time, through a lens of a specific tradition, which would be Tibetan, and then within that, the focus that's provided by the Drikung, in the same way the Drikung is fully Tibetan, and in the same way Tibetan is presenting all of Buddhism. So instead of the general approach, we're getting the more specific to see how and where the specific also includes everything. And when I was thinking about it, I was thinking, well, how long did it take me to go from being curious to being fully committed? And I would say I went from the general encounters of Buddhism, maybe reading one book or attending one lecture of a Lama who was passing through Maine, to when I met His Holiness and went specifically into the Drikung Kagyu lineage. That was 12 to 15 years. So I think we stay curious until we find the key to the door. And then even going through the door, we might not get to a specific teacher and lineage for another whole period of time. Primarily because we just don't encounter that in our culture. And probably in some ways we're accumulating the merit to have that relationship to Buddhism. We're changing our life enough to be open and receptive so that we start to see and hear what is present in our environment and what we're able to connect to directly. So I can only say that multiple factors go into that movement. You can think of it, again, a main example. We're near the ocean. At first, you're just dipping your toe in the water, then you're wading, and you might stay wading for quite a long period. Like in Maine, there's a lot of shallow water at the beach. You have to wade pretty far out before you dive right in. So each of us is where we are in movement, in motion. But all these individual streams of our own inclination and what we've discovered along the way finally do come together. And then what do we have? We have the ocean. How do you study something as big as the ocean? How do you study something that contains 84,000 teachings? And not only how do you study, but how do you practice? Practice and study go together. Our practice is enhanced by our study, and particularly those folks who have been able to attend one of our retreats, we start to see how many areas of knowledge contribute to then the experiential learning you do on your cushion. And that experiential opening progresses very quickly once you understand more about how to make it effective to open your heart and mind. So it's not a small topic, it's a big topic, which is to say, this is why now I'm opening a genre called Lam Rim, or Stages of the Path. And at the request of a king of Tibet, Atisha wrote the first Lam Rim text. Atisha was a major teacher who came to Tibet and affected all of Tibetan Buddhism. He brought Shantideva, he brought Lojong, which we studied for a year. He brought the classical studies of India to Tibet. But what he did was he looked at the ocean and said, well, if we look at the ocean, what is water made of? We might say H2O, atoms, molecules. What is the great breadth and depth of Buddhist teaching made of? And he organized it into topics, into ideas, in a way that reflect not only stages of learning, but process of learning. In order to understand this, first you have to understand this, and it would be helpful first to understand this. In order to deepen your commitment, you have to think about these ideas, then these ideas, then these ideas. So Lam Rim text became an educational genre, and Atisha's first text led to, in the Kagyu lineage, remember from our lineage teachings, there was Naropa, Marpa, Milarepa, Gampopa. Gampopa wrote the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. So that's studied pervasively in the Kagyu. In the Gelugpa tradition, at a certain era, I believe Lama Tsongkhapa, the founder of the Gelugpa, was a contemporary of Lord Jigten Sumgud. So it would have been maybe 100 years later, he wrote Stages of the Path. So we have these compendiums that present not only an overview, but it's called Lam Rim, or Stages of the Path or Road. They present the not only the studies, but the activities that are a Buddhist path. or a lifetime. How you put, essentially, if you want to grow, how you put one foot in front of the other. So I thought today it would be interesting for you to think of something about your journey and what is the key that opened the door for you, your inclination, and then how does that determine your current commitment to growing and learning, in the sense that Sunday Dharma still will be one text at a time and looking at aspects, from start to finish, still applicable to all levels, going from curiosity to I want the stages that lead to the profound. But where are you in your continuum of learning and investigation? And I would say what's interesting about this stage is we have this natural inclination, which for me was the arts, but in order to progress, I had to bring everything else to my inclination. I couldn't stay in just my happy zone. I have to tell you this. My first trip to India, I went with someone who did sand mandalas in museums here in India, and we actually brought him to the Mecca, the art school in Portland. So he said, if you come to India with me, I can set you up and you can learn more about sand mandalas. I'll find a teacher for you. And so I had a very grumpy teacher. He called in a favor. The guy must have been a student of the monk that I knew, who didn't didn't really want to add another commitment to his very busy life, particularly for a strange Western woman. And I so appreciate him because after I'd been studying maybe once a week with him for a half hour, he said to me, I can teach you as an artist. I can teach you how to make the blueprint, how to move the sand, but essentially that's nothing. If you actually want to learn what a sand mandala is, you have to move near a Dharma center, you have to learn Tibetan, you have to study, you have to change your whole life. And I thought it was his grumpiness. But really, he was telling me the truth. He was straightforward telling me the truth. And I so appreciate that. I don't think I was ready quite to accept the truth. It took me another year. Really by the next year, I said to the art school, I'll teach another year and then I'm leaving. And I moved to India to begin really to take ordination and to completely enter studies in that way, which is not to say I'm expecting that of anyone. I'm just saying it's dependent on what you want to learn, how much you want to learn, how you engage in both Sunday Dharma and everything else that we offer and that other centers offer. So it's good to take time to think, oh, this is where I am and this is my aspiration for my future. And all of those futures are fine. They're all building wonderful knowledge for you. Very rarely people take the journey that I took that included ordination and a complete life change. And as you learn from the lineage, there are committed lay lives and committed ordained lives, and all of them in the lineage were examples of people through their commitment becoming completely enlightened. And at the same time, there were hundreds and thousands of students and practitioners who gained immensely, but didn't choose to change their whole life. But as we're starting this new program, and as we're looking at a Lam Rim text with which can be considered a little bit drier, say, than the bodhicitta practice, but no less essential, it's good to think about why we're doing this and how you want to think about your commitment. And the more you express your commitment, the more I know about how I can help you grow. So I'm going to open up the chat rooms. First, we'll dedicate and stop the live stream. Bodhicitta, excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher.